The cathedral doors burst open at the exact moment Elira Vance realized she'd been abandoned at the altar. Not late, not delayed, abandoned. Her fiancé, Prince Dorian, had fled to his mistress, a woman everyone knew about except, apparently, the bride. 200 nobles watched her humiliation in real time. The peace treaty between their kingdoms was disintegrating before dessert had even been served. Then his brother stepped forward. King Kael Draven, the war hero, the man they called the Feral King. His proposal was simple, brutal, and completely insane. Marry me instead. Stay until the end to see how a jilted princess becomes the most powerful queen in the realm. Hit like, and comment what city you're watching from. The flower petals were still fresh on the cathedral floor when Elira's world ended. She stood at the altar in a dress that had taken 4 seamstresses 6 weeks to complete. Ivory silk that caught the light filtering through stained glass windows 3 stories tall. Her bouquet, white roses and winter jasmine, had been selected to symbolize new beginnings and eternal love. The irony would have been funny if she could breathe. Prince Dorian's seat was empty. Not just empty, abandoned. His ceremonial sword still rested against the velvet cushion where he'd placed it before excusing himself just for a moment 20 minutes ago. His crown sat waiting. The high priest stood frozen mid-prayer, his voice trailing off into awkward silence that filled the massive cathedral like smoke. Elira's fingers tightened around the bouquet stems until thorns bit into her palm through the ribbon wrapping. The pain helped. It gave her something to focus on besides the 200 pairs of eyes drilling into her back. Perhaps the prince is simply delayed, the high priest offered weakly. His voice echoed off marble columns that had witnessed 3 centuries of royal weddings. None quite like this. He's not delayed. The voice came from the front pew, sharp and clear. Lady Margot Thorne, Dorian's former lover, rose to her feet with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She wore crimson, a deliberate insult at a wedding where guests were supposed to wear pastels. He's with me. Well, he was. I sent him away, but he was rather insistent. The cathedral erupted. Nobles from both kingdoms surged to their feet. Voices overlapped in a cacophony of shock, outrage, and barely concealed delight at the scandal. This was the wedding meant to unite Vance and Draven territories after decades of border disputes and trade wars. A marriage alliance between Princess Elira of House Vance and Prince Dorian of House Draven was supposed to bring peace, prosperity, and stability. Instead, it brought chaos. "You're lying," Elira heard herself say. Her voice sounded strange, distant, like it belonged to someone else. "Dorian wouldn't what? Choose me?" Margot laughed, and the sound was cruel. "Darling, he's been choosing me for 3 years. Did you really think this little arrangement would change that? Political marriages don't erase love, they just complicate it." Elira's father, Duke Corvin Vance, stood so quickly his chair crashed backward. "This is an outrage, an insult to House Vance, and a violation of treaty terms. Where is King Aldrich? Where is his son? Someone fetch Prince Dorian immediately." But King Aldrich Draven, Dorian's father, remained seated in the royal box. The old king looked pale, shaken, his hands trembling slightly as they gripped the armrests. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came, because everyone in the cathedral was beginning to understand the same terrible truth. Dorian wasn't coming back. A side door opened and Lord Chancellor Petrus entered, his face grave. He walked directly to King Aldrich and whispered something that made the old man's face go gray. Aldrich stood slowly, leaning heavily on his cane. "The prince," he announced, his voice carrying despite its tremor, "has left the capital. He departed through the eastern gate approximately 15 minutes ago. Alone." The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Alone, not delayed, not reconsidering, not nervous, gone. Elira felt the cathedral spin. This couldn't be happening. She'd spent 6 months preparing for this wedding, negotiating treaty terms, learning Draven customs and history. She'd memorized the names of every noble family in Dorian's kingdom. She'd practiced her vows in front of a mirror until they sounded natural instead of rehearsed. She'd done everything right. And he'd run to his mistress anyway. "The treaty!" someone shouted from the Vance delegation. "Without the marriage, the treaty is void." "Our trade agreements. The border disputes will restart. This is a declaration of war." Voices escalated, accusations flew. Alira watched nobles from both kingdoms begin to fracture along old fault lines, the fragile peace that had held for 6 months splintering in real time. Someone knocked over a candelabra, someone else shoved someone. The cathedral guards moved forward, hands on sword hilts. This was how wars started, not with armies or declarations, but with humiliation and broken promises in front of witnesses. Alira's mother appeared at her elbow. Lady Helena Vance, elegant even in crisis, gripped her daughter's arm. "We're leaving, now, before this becomes—" "It already is," Alira said quietly. "Then before it becomes worse." But leaving meant accepting it. Leaving meant walking out of this cathedral as the jilted princess, the abandoned bride, the woman so inadequate that her fiancé literally fled the country rather than marry her. Every noble here would return to their estates with that story. Within a week, it would spread across both kingdoms. Within a month, it would become legend. Princess Alira Vance, so undesirable that— "Enough!" The single word cut through the chaos like a blade. The voice came from the back of the cathedral, deep and commanding, carrying a weight that made people turn instinctively. Alira felt it in her chest, that voice, like a physical thing. King Cale Draven walked down the center aisle. Dorian's older brother moved like a predator through the crowd of nobles who parted for him automatically. Where Dorian was charming and golden-haired, Cale was dark and intense. Tall, broad-shouldered, with black hair tied back and scars visible on his hands. Marks from the border wars he'd fought in for 5 years. They called him the Feral King because he'd spent more time on battlefields than in ballrooms, because he'd personally led cavalry charges and night raids, because he scared the hell out of diplomats who preferred negotiation to action. He'd arrived late to the wedding, Alira remembered. Something about trouble at the northern border. She'd seen him only once, briefly, at the betrothal dinner 3 months ago. He'd been polite, distant, watching her with dark eyes that gave away nothing. Now those eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Cale reached the altar and turned to face the assembled nobles. "My brother has disgraced House Draven and broken his oath. The treaty required a marriage alliance between our houses. It did not specify which Draven." Silence fell. You could have heard a pin drop in the massive cathedral. 200 nobles stared at King Cale like he'd announced he was actually a dragon in disguise. "Your Majesty," Duke Corvin said slowly, "surely you're not suggesting—" "I'm not suggesting." Kyle's voice was flat, final. "I'm proposing. Princess Alira, will you marry me instead?" The world tilted. Alira stared at him. At this man she'd spoken to maybe 3 times in her entire life. This king with a reputation for ruthlessness and strategic brilliance, who'd won wars through unconventional tactics and sheer stubborn will. Who was looking at her now with an expression she couldn't read. "You can't be serious," she managed. "I'm always serious." Something flickered in his dark eyes. Amusement? "The treaty needs a marriage. My brother proved himself unworthy. I'm offering an alternative. A better one, frankly. You'd be a queen instead of a princess." "This is madness," Lady Helena hissed. "Cale Draven is practically a stranger." "So was Dorian," Alira said quietly. "I'd met him 4 times before agreeing to this marriage." "But Dorian was—" Her mother stopped, unable to finish that sentence without making it worse. Dorian was what? More desirable? More appropriate? More willing? Cale's expression didn't change, but Alira saw his jaw tighten fractionally. He'd heard the unspoken insult. Everyone had. King Aldrich stepped forward, leaning on his cane. "My son, this is unprecedented. The treaty specified a union between House Vance and House Draven to secure peace and trade agreements. It required a marriage witnessed by both kingdoms' nobility." Cale's voice was perfectly level. "We have the nobility, we have the witness, we have the bride, the cathedral, and the priest. We're missing only a willing groom. I'm standing right here." "You're the king," someone protested. "Kings don't— This isn't how— How what? How politics works." Cale's laugh was sharp. "Politics is chaos held together by agreements and appearances. The appearance right now is that House Draven has humiliated House Vance, violated a treaty, and triggered a potential war. I'm offering a solution that turns humiliation into elevation and transforms a broken promise into something stronger." He turned back to Alira, stepped closer. close enough that she could see the silver scar along his left cheekbone, the flecks of amber in his dark eyes. He smelled like leather and winter air, like he'd ridden hard to get here. "You have 3 choices, princess," he said quietly, for her ears only. "Walk out of this cathedral as the woman my brother abandoned. Return home and watch the treaty collapse and the border wars restart. People will die. Trade will suffer. Your kingdom and mine will both be weaker for it. Second choice?" Her voice was steadier than she felt. "Refuse this marriage and demand compensation. Gold, land, trade concessions. House Draven will pay for my brother's insult. You'll return home wealthier but still unmarried, still the abandoned bride. The story will follow you everywhere." Elira's fingers tightened on her bouquet. "And the third choice? Marry me." Kael's voice dropped lower. "Right now, in front of everyone. Turn this disaster into a triumph. Become a queen instead of a princess. Save the treaty, save face, save the peace." He paused. "And make my brother regret every decision he made today." That last part shouldn't have mattered. Elira knew it shouldn't matter. This was politics, not revenge, strategy, not emotion. But she'd spent 6 months preparing to marry a man who'd fled to his mistress rather than stand beside her at the altar. A man who'd humiliated her in front of 2 kingdoms' worth of nobility. A man who'd gambled peace and prosperity for what? Love? Lust? Cowardice? Anger flickered to life in her chest, hot and sharp. "This is insane," she said. "Completely," Kael agreed. "But insanity sometimes wins wars, I should know." He held out his hand. "What do you say, princess? Want to do something insane?" Elira looked at his hand, scarred knuckles, calluses from sword work. This was not a man who spent his time at court functions and garden parties. This was a man who'd fought on the front lines, who'd built his reputation through action rather than birthright. A man who'd just offered to marry her not out of duty or love, but out of pure strategic calculation. And somehow that honesty was more appealing than Dorian's pretty lies had ever been. She looked past Kael at the assembled nobles, at Lady Margot, still standing in crimson, her smile faltering now, at King Aldrich, pale and shaken, at her own parents, her father furious and her mother terrified, at the high priest, clutching his prayer book like a shield, at the empty seat where Dorian should have been. Elira had played by the rules her entire life, done what was expected, been the perfect diplomatic princess, gracious and educated and prepared. She'd agreed to marry a stranger for political alliance. She'd set aside her own wants for the good of her kingdom. And where had that gotten her? Abandoned at the altar. So maybe it was time to stop playing by the rules. Maybe it was time to do something insane. Elira dropped her bouquet. The white roses and winter jasmine hit the marble floor with a soft sound that echoed in the silent cathedral. She stepped over them, moving closer to Kael, and placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and solid. "Yes," she said clearly. "I'll marry you." The cathedral erupted again, but differently this time. Shock instead of outrage. Confusion instead of anger. Nobles shouted questions, demanded explanations, protested the irregularity. Kael ignored all of it. He turned to the high priest. "We have a willing bride and groom. The treaty requires a marriage today, witnessed by assembled nobility. Perform the ceremony." The high priest looked desperately at King Aldrich. "Your Majesty, surely this requires discussion." "The discussion ended when my youngest son fled like a coward," Aldrich said heavily. He sank back into his seat, suddenly looking every one of his 70 years. "Kael is right. The treaty needs a marriage. Perform the ceremony." "But the legal precedent will be established today," Kael said flatly. "The rings are already here. The witnesses are present. The bride has consented. What else do you need?" The high priest swallowed hard, looked at Elira. "Princess, you understand what you're agreeing to? This is highly irregular." "I understand perfectly," Elira kept her voice level. "I'm agreeing to marry King Kael Draven in front of these witnesses to fulfill the treaty requirements and secure peace between our kingdoms. Let's proceed." She sounded calm, confident, like this had been the plan all along instead of a desperate gamble made in the space between heartbeats. Inside, her mind was screaming, "What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing?" But she'd made her choice, and Elira Vance never went back on her word. The high priest opened his prayer book with trembling hands. Then, let us begin. The ceremony was both identical to and completely different from what Elira had rehearsed. The same words, the same vows, the same symbolic gestures. But instead of Dorian's hand in hers, it was Kael's. Instead of a charming prince with golden hair and easy smiles, she faced a dark-eyed king with scars and a reputation for controlled violence. When the priest asked if anyone objected, 3 people started to stand. Kael turned his head and looked at them. Just looked. All 3 sat back down. The vows were standard, traditional. Elira had memorized them months ago, but hearing them directed at a different groom made them feel alien, like words in a foreign language she'd learned phonetically without understanding the meaning. Do you, Elira Vance, take this man as your lawful husband, to stand beside an alliance, to honor in duty, to trust in word and deed, from this day forward? Her mouth was dry. I do. Do you, Kael Draven, take this woman as your lawful wife, to stand beside an alliance, to honor in duty, to trust in word and deed, from this day forward? I do. His voice was steady, certain, like he'd made this decision long before today. The rings were wrong. The ring meant for Dorian's finger was too small for Kael's hand, and for a horrible moment Elira thought they'd have to stop, find new rings, delay everything. But Kael simply took the delicate gold band and slipped it onto his smallest finger instead, wearing it like a bizarre statement of intent. The ring he placed on her finger was his own signet ring, heavy gold stamped with the Draven crest, far too large. It spun loosely when she lowered her hand. I'll have it resized, Kael murmured. Today. Then the high priest was pronouncing them married, husband and wife, united in alliance and law. His voice shook on the final words, like he still couldn't quite believe this was happening. You may kiss, the priest began. Kael pulled Elira close and kissed her. It wasn't ceremonial. It wasn't gentle or appropriate for public viewing. It was possessive and intense and completely deliberate, his hand cupped against the back of her neck, tilting her head up, claiming her in front of 200 witnesses with a kiss that made several nobles gasp. When he released her, Elira's lips were burning and her head was spinning. Kael's eyes were dark, unreadable. That's for the witnesses, he said quietly. So there's no question about the legitimacy of this marriage. Right. For appearances. For politics. Her lips still burned. Kael turned to face the assembled nobles, keeping Elira's hand firmly in his. I present to you Queen Elira Draven. Anyone who questions her legitimacy or position answers to me directly. Are we clear? Silence. Then slowly, nobles began to kneel. First the Draven delegation, then, after a tense moment, some of the Vance nobility. Not everyone. Duke Corvin remained standing, his face red with barely suppressed fury. Lady Helena knelt but kept her eyes down, refusing to look at her daughter. But enough people knelt to make it official, to make it real. Elira Vance had entered this cathedral as a princess bride. She would leave as a queen. The reception that followed was the most awkward event in royal history. The feast had been prepared for Dorian's wedding, with place cards and seating arrangements that no longer made any sense. Servants scrambled to rearrange everything, while nobles clustered in tight groups, whispering furiously. Elira sat at the high table beside Kael, picking at food she couldn't taste. The wedding cake, 6 tiers of spun sugar and preserved roses, seemed obscene now. A monument to a marriage that should have happened, but didn't. You should eat, Kael said. He'd changed out of his travel clothes into proper formal wear, black and silver, the Draven colors. On him, they looked dangerous instead of regal. It's going to be a long night. I'm not hungry. Eat anyway. People are watching. He was right. Every eye in the hall was fixed on them, judging, analyzing, trying to figure out what this marriage meant for alliances and power structures. Elira forced herself to take a bite of roasted pheasant. It tasted like ash. Your brother, she said quietly. Where did he go? No idea. Aldrich sent guards after him, but Dorian had a head start. Kael's voice was carefully neutral. He won't get far. He's not exactly skilled at survival. You sound like you don't care. I don't? Kael took a long drink of wine. Dorian has always been impulsive and selfish. This was inevitable. I'm just surprised he waited until the actual wedding day instead of running earlier. How reassuring. I'm not here to reassure you, Alara. He said her name like he'd been practicing it. I'm here to make this work. There's a difference. Before she could respond, a servant approached. Your Majesty, the Duke of Vance requests an audience. Her father. Illyra's stomach clenched. Now? He's rather insistent, Your Majesty. Kael stood smoothly. We'll receive him in the side chamber, together. Duke Corvin was pacing when they entered the small council room off the main hall. He whirled when they arrived, his face flushed with anger and wine. Alone, he demanded. I want to speak with my daughter alone. She's not just your daughter anymore, Kael said mildly. She's my queen. Whatever you say to her, you say to both of us. You arrogant! Corvin bit off the insult with visible effort. Do you have any idea what you've done, Illyra? Marrying this man on impulse, without consultation? Without consultation? Illyra's voice rose. You negotiated my marriage to Dorian without asking me. You decided my future in a treaty meeting, but now, when I make my own choice, suddenly consultation matters? This is different. How? How is it different? Because Kael Draven is dangerous. Her father's control finally snapped. He's the feral king, Illyra. He's spent 5 years fighting wars, not governing. He has enemies in 3 kingdoms. Marrying him makes you a target. Marrying Dorian made me a joke, Illyra shot back. At least being a target is interesting. Corvin stared at her like she'd grown a second head. This isn't you. This recklessness, this anger. Maybe it is me. Maybe you just never bothered to look close enough to notice. Your Majesty. Kael's voice cut through the argument like a knife. Your daughter is now queen of one of the most powerful kingdoms in the realm. She has my full protection, my name, and my resources. If you have concerns about her safety or position, address them to me directly, but don't question her choices in my presence. The 2 men stared at each other. Corvin's hands clenched into fists. For a moment, Illyra thought her father might actually throw a punch. Then Corvin turned and walked out without another word. The silence he left behind was deafening. Illyra sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. That went well. He'll come around. Kael remained standing, watching the door. Give him time to realize this actually benefits House Vance significantly. You're a queen now. That elevates your entire family's position. Is that supposed to make me feel better? It's supposed to be strategic reality. He turned to look at her. Which brings us to what happens next. Next? We have a marriage in name only. We need to make it believable, convincing. That means shared quarters, public appearances, coordinated strategy. Kael paused. And we need to discuss terms. Terms? This is a political arrangement, Illyra. We should be clear about expectations. He pulled out a chair and sat across from her. I propose we maintain appearances of a functional marriage while pursuing our separate interests. You'll have freedom to manage your own affairs as long as they don't conflict with mine. In public, we present a united front. In private, he shrugged, we're allies, partners, not lovers. Something in Illyra's chest twisted at that clinical description, which was stupid. She barely knew this man. She shouldn't care that he was making their marriage sound like a business contract, except it was a business contract. That's exactly what royal marriages were. Fine, she said. Separate interests. United front. Anything else? Yes. Kael leaned forward. Your former fiancé. When Dorian comes back, and he will come back, how do you want to handle it? What do you mean? I mean, he ran to his mistress, but that won't last. Margot Thorne enjoys the chase more than the capture. Once the novelty wears off, Dorian will realize what he gave up. He'll try to win you back or cause problems, possibly both. Kael's eyes were sharp. So we need a strategy. Do we freeze him out? Use him? Public humiliation or private negotiations? Illyra stared at him. You're asking me how I want to handle my ex-fiancé running back. I'm asking how we weaponize it. Kael's smile was cold. This is going to happen, Illyra. Better to plan for it than be caught off guard. And honestly, making Dorian regret his choices could be, satisfying for both of us. You want to use me as bait. I want to use the situation to our advantage. There's a difference. He stood, offering his hand. Come on. We have a wedding feast to endure and a kingdom to convince. We can discuss strategy later. Illyra took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. The oversized signet ring spun loosely on her finger. She'd married a stranger to save face and preserve peace. Now she just had to figure out how to survive being his queen. Ian. The rest of the reception blurred together, toasts that felt hollow. Dances with a husband who moved with military precision instead of grace. Polite conversations with nobles who were clearly trying to figure out what the hell had just happened. Through it all, Kael stayed close, his hand on her back, his presence beside her, making it clear to everyone watching that this marriage was real, legitimate, final. Near midnight, as the feast finally began to wind down, Lady Margot approached their table. She'd changed into a different dress, still red, still inappropriate, and held a wine glass like a weapon. "Your Majesties," she said with a curtsy that was just shy of mocking. "Congratulations on your unexpected union." "Margot?" Kyle's voice was flat. "You're still here. Where else would I be? This is the social event of the decade." She turned to Elira with a smile that had edges. "You must be so relieved, Princess. Excuse me, Queen Elira, to have a replacement groom so readily available. How fortunate." Elira met her eyes. "Fortune had nothing to do with it. I made a choice, unlike your prince, who ran away from his." Margot's smile tightened. "Dorian made a choice too. He chose love over duty. Some might call that brave. Some might call it cowardice." Kael stood, and somehow the movement felt threatening. "Margot, you've had your moment. You revealed your affair publicly, disrupted a royal wedding, and contributed to a political crisis. Congratulations. Now leave before I have you removed." "You can't." "I'm the king. I absolutely can." His voice dropped to something dangerous. "And Margot? If I find out you had anything to do with Dorian's decision to run, if you encouraged this disaster for your own entertainment, I will make you regret it. We clear?" Margot paled. She set down her wine glass with a hand that wasn't quite steady. "Crystal clear, Your Majesty." She left quickly. Elira watched her go, then looked up at Kael. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. That was strategy, not chivalry." But something in his expression had softened fractionally. "Come on, let's end this circus and get out of here." The royal chambers had been prepared for Dorian. Elira's belongings had been moved there earlier in the day, arranged in a suite she'd never seen. Now she stood in the doorway of rooms meant for her and a different husband, trying not to think about how completely her life had changed in the space of a few hours. Kael followed her in and immediately began removing his formal jacket. "I'll take the sitting room, you can have the bedroom. We'll maintain appearances by sharing the suite, but I'm not—" He stopped, reading her expression. "What?" "Nothing. It's just surreal." Elira sank onto a settee. "This morning I woke up as a princess preparing to marry a prince. Tonight I'm a queen married to a king I barely know. Everything changed so fast. That's how the important things happen. Fast. Decisive." Kael loosened his collar. "The slow changes are rarely the ones that matter." "Is that military philosophy?" "That's survival." He paused. "Elira, I need you to understand something. I didn't propose to you out of pity or impulse. This was calculated, strategic. You're smart, politically trained, and now you have a very public reason to prove yourself. That makes you useful, motivated, dangerous in the best way. You married me because I'm useful? I married you because we can help each other." Kael met her eyes. "You wanted to prove Dorian wrong. I want a queen who's actually competent instead of decorative. We both benefit from this arrangement working. That's more honest than most royal marriages start with." He was right. It was more honest. It just didn't feel particularly comforting. "Get some rest," Kael said. "Tomorrow we start making this believable. The court will be watching for cracks. We can't give them any." He disappeared into the sitting room, leaving Elira alone in the bedroom that was supposed to be her marriage suite. She changed out of her wedding dress slowly, hanging the ivory silk in a wardrobe next to traveling clothes she didn't recognize. Kael's things, she realized. He'd moved in here too, maintaining the illusion. When she finally lay down in the massive bed, exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. But sleep wouldn't come. She stared at the ceiling, replaying the day in her mind. Dorian's empty seat, Margot's cruel smile, her father's anger, Kael's unexpected proposal. "Marry me instead." Elira touched the oversized signet ring on her finger. In a few hours, Kale would have it resized. It would fit perfectly, look intentional instead of improvised. Just like this marriage. They would make it work because they had to. Because the alternative was chaos and war and humiliation. But lying there in the dark, Illyra couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just made either the best or worst decision of her life. And she had no idea which. The first morning of her marriage, Illyra woke to find Kael already gone. A note sat on the bedside table in sharp, efficient handwriting. Council meeting at dawn. Your presence required at 10. Dress formally. The court will be assessing. No greeting, no signature, just instructions. Illyra crumpled the note and threw it across the room. Her ladies-in-waiting arrived at 8, a trio of women she'd never met before. They introduced themselves with tight smiles and tighter curtsies. Lady Sarah, Lady Philippa, Lady Constance, all Draven nobility, all clearly unhappy about their new assignment. Queen Margot's ladies served for 15 years, Lady Sarah said as she laid out a deep green gown. Until she passed, may she rest peacefully. It's been 3 years since the castle had a proper queen. We're adjusting. Translation: you're a replacement nobody wanted. I appreciate your service, Illyra said evenly, and your honesty. Lady Philippa's eyes flickered with surprise, but she said nothing as she began arranging Illyra's hair. The silence was thick enough to cut. By the time Illyra entered the throne room at precisely 10 o'clock, she'd been dressed, corseted, jeweled, and mentally prepared to face a court that despised her. The heavy crown they'd placed on her head, Margot's crown, she'd been informed, felt like it was trying to snap her neck. The throne room was packed. Nobles from both kingdoms filled the space, their conversations dying as she entered. Kale sat on the king's throne, reviewing documents with Lord Chancellor Petrus. He glanced up as she approached, his expression unreadable. Queen Illyra, Petrus announced unnecessarily. Everyone was already staring. Illyra climbed the dais and took her seat on the smaller throne beside Kael's. The cushion was worn in the center from years of use by a woman she'd never met, but whose ghost clearly haunted this room. You're late, Kael said quietly. Your note said 10. It's 10. Court starts at 9:30. He didn't look at her, still scanning his documents. You should have asked. Heat flooded her face. First day, and she'd already made a mistake. Around them, she could hear whispers starting, see nobles exchanging knowing glances. The new queen doesn't even know basic protocol. Perhaps, Lady Margot's voice rang out from the crowd, someone should provide the queen with a proper schedule, since she's new to these arrangements. Scattered laughter rippled through the room. Kael's head came up slowly. His eyes found Margot in the crowd. Lady Margot, I'm surprised you're still in the capital. I thought you'd be following Prince Dorian to wherever he's hiding. The laughter died instantly. Margot's face went pale. I haven't spoken to Dorian since you helped him abandon his wedding? Yes, we're all aware. Kael set down his documents with deliberate care. You're banned from court functions for 6 months. Guards, escort Lady Margot out. You can't. This is outrageous. I have rights as a noble. You have the rights I grant you. Kael's voice was flat, final. And right now, I'm granting you 6 months to reconsider your choices. Guards. 2 soldiers moved forward. Margot looked around wildly for support, but the other nobles suddenly found the floor fascinating. She was escorted out, her protests echoing until the heavy doors slammed shut. The throne room was silent. Kael returned to his documents like nothing had happened. Lord Petrus, next item. The meeting continued, but Illyra barely heard it. She was too aware of every eye still flickering toward her, every whispered conversation. Kael had defended her publicly, humiliated Margot in front of the entire court, but it felt less like protection and more like ownership. My queen, my rules, my justice. After the session ended, Kael caught her arm before she could leave. Walk with me. It wasn't a request. They walked through the palace gardens in silence, flanked by guards at a discreet distance. The autumn air was crisp, leaves falling from ancient oak trees that had probably witnessed 100 royal scandals. You handled that poorly, Kael said finally. Excuse me? The schedule mistake. You should have confirmed the time last night instead of assuming. He stopped beside a fountain, its water reflecting gray clouds. The court is looking for weaknesses. Every mistake you make confirms their belief that you don't belong here. I've been queen for less than 24 hours, and you'll be judged from the first minute. Kale turned to face her. I'm not criticizing to be cruel, Illyra. I'm telling you what you're up against. Half this court thinks you're a desperate woman who trapped me into marriage. The other half thinks I married you out of pity. Both groups want you to fail. And what do you think? I think you're smart enough to prove them wrong. His eyes were intense. But you need to stop waiting for permission or approval. You're the queen. Act like it. By doing what? Banning anyone who laughs at me? If necessary. Kale's expression didn't shift. Margot wasn't banned for laughing. She was banned for orchestrating a public humiliation and then showing up to gloat about it. There's a difference between managing optics and being petty. How generous of you to explain the difference. Would you prefer I let them tear you apart? Kale's voice sharpened. Because that's the alternative. You're an outsider who became queen through scandal. Without my support, this court would eat you alive. Then maybe you should have thought of that before proposing. I did think of it. That's why I'm helping you survive. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. We made a deal, Illyra. United front in public. I upheld my end. You need to uphold yours. That means learning fast, adapting faster, and not giving them ammunition. Illyra's hands clenched into fists. I didn't ask for this. Neither did I, but we're here, so we deal with it. Kale pulled something from his pocket, a small velvet box. Give me your hand. Warily, she extended her left hand. Kale removed the oversized signet ring and replaced it with a new one, still gold, still bearing the Draven crest, but sized perfectly. It slid onto her finger and stayed there, solid and permanent. Better, he said. Now you look like you belong. Before she could respond, a commotion erupted from the palace entrance. Raised voices, the clatter of hooves on cobblestones. Kael's hand went instinctively to his sword hilt as guards rushed toward the disturbance. A rider burst through the garden gates, his horse lathered and wild-eyed. He practically fell from the saddle, stumbling toward them. Your Majesty! The messenger was covered in road dust and blood. Prince Dorian, he's returned, demanding entry at the main gates. Kael's expression went cold and sharp. When? Just now. He has Lady Margot with him. They're both... The messenger swallowed hard. They're both demanding to speak with you, immediately. The bottom dropped out of Illyra's stomach. 24 hours. Her former fiancé had lasted 24 hours before crawling back. Let them in, Kael said quietly. Your Majesty, are you certain? Let them in. Bring them to the throne room, and summon the full court. If Dorian wants an audience, he'll get one he won't forget. The messenger ran. Kael turned to Illyra, his dark eyes unreadable. This is it, the moment we planned for. Are you ready? No? Good. Neither is he. Kael offered his arm. Come on, my queen, let's give them a show. The throne room filled rapidly as word spread. Nobles crowded in, eager for more scandal, more drama. Illyra took her place on the queen's throne, back straight, crown heavy, trying not to think about the fact that she was about to face the man who'd abandoned her at the altar. Kael sat beside her, utterly composed. Remember, he murmured, we control this room, not him. Don't give him power by reacting. Easy for you to say. Nothing about this is easy. His hand found hers on the armrest, squeezed once. But we do it anyway. The doors opened. Dorian entered first, still wearing the same clothes from yesterday, now rumpled and stained. His golden hair was disheveled, his face unshaven. He looked like he'd spent the night in a barn. Behind him, Lady Margot looked equally rough, her red dress torn at the hem. They stopped at the base of the dais. Brother, Dorian said, his voice was hoarse, we need to talk. Alone. No. Kael's voice carried through the silent room. Whatever you have to say, you say here, in front of witnesses, just like you abandoned your wedding in front of witnesses. Dorian flinched. Kael, please. I made a mistake. You made several. Kael leaned back in his throne. You broke a treaty, humiliated a princess, destabilized 2 kingdoms, and now you show up looking like you slept in a ditch, demanding private audiences. What exactly did you expect would happen? I expected my brother to understand. Your brother is dead. The coldness in Kael's voice made Illyra shiver. I'm your king. Address me properly or leave." The throne room went deathly quiet. Dorian's face went red, then white. "Your Majesty," he gritted out, "I humbly request—" "Denied. You have no standing to request anything." Kale gestured dismissively. "You're lucky I don't charge you with treason for violating a sworn treaty oath. The only reason I haven't is because you're father's son, and he's suffered enough embarrassment." "I came back!" Dorian's voice rose desperately. "I realized my mistake, and I came back to make it right." "Make it right how?" Elira heard herself ask. Her voice sounded distant, cold. "By apologizing? By offering excuses?" Dorian turned to her, and something flickered in his eyes. Hope, maybe. "Elira, princess, I was wrong. I panicked. The pressure, the expectations. I wasn't thinking clearly. But I'm here now, and I want to— I'm not a princess anymore," she interrupted. "I'm a queen. You should address me properly." His mouth opened and closed. Around them, nobles leaned forward, hungry for every word. "Queen Elira," Dorian tried again. "Your I apologize, sincerely. I hurt you and I regret it, but it's not too late. We can still— the marriage wasn't consummated. It can be annulled. We can fix this." "Fix what?" Kale's voice was dangerously soft. "Dorian, are you suggesting that my marriage should be annulled?" "I'm saying it was a mistake born from panic. My marriage was a deliberate choice made by two consenting adults in front of assembled witnesses and blessed by the high priest." Kale stood, and the movement made Dorian take an involuntary step back. "It's as legitimate as any royal marriage in history. More so, actually, since both parties actually showed up." "But you only married her because I married her because she's intelligent, politically trained, and strong enough to handle being queen. All the things you apparently aren't strong enough to handle." Kael descended the dais slowly, each step deliberate. "You want to know the truth, Dorian? You did me a favor. You removed yourself from succession, proved yourself unreliable, and freed me to make a better choice. So thank you. Sincerely." Dorian looked like he'd been slapped. "You can't mean that." "Every word." Kale stopped directly in front of his brother. "Now, here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave the capital. Today. You'll retire to the summer estate and stay there until I decide you're trustworthy enough to show your face at court again. If you're lucky, that'll be in about 5 years. 5 years, you can't exile me. I can do whatever I want. I'm the king." Kale's voice dropped lower. "And Dorian, if you ever publicly disrespect my wife again, if you ever suggest our marriage is illegitimate, if you even hint that you have some claim to her, I will strip your title and lands, brother or not. Are we clear?" Dorian's hands clenched into fists. For a moment, Elira thought he might actually swing. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. Then Margot stepped forward. "Your Majesty, if I may—" "You may not." Kale didn't even look at her. "You're banned from court. The guards should have stopped you at the gates. The fact that you're here means someone disobeyed a direct order. I'll deal with that later. Right now, you're leaving. With Dorian. Permanently." "Permanently?" Margot's voice went shrill. "You're banishing me?" "From court functions, yes, from the capital, strongly encouraged. You orchestrated this disaster for your own entertainment. There are consequences." Kale finally turned to her. "Be grateful I'm not doing worse." Margot's face went through several emotions: shock, rage, fear. She opened her mouth, closed it, seemed to realize there was no argument that would work. She grabbed Dorian's arm. "Come on, this is pointless." But Dorian pulled away from her. No, I'm not leaving. Not like this." He looked past Kael to Elira. Tell him you don't want this marriage, that you only agreed because you were humiliated and desperate. Tell the truth." The throne room held its breath. Elira stood slowly, descended the dais, walked until she was standing directly in front of Dorian, close enough to see the desperation in his bloodshot eyes. "You want the truth?" she said quietly. "Fine. Here it is. When you ran yesterday, you broke something in me. Not my heart. I never loved you. But my trust. My belief that people keep their promises." She paused. Kael didn't run. He stepped forward when everyone else stepped back. He kept his word. "So yes, I chose this marriage. Willingly. And I'd choose it again." Dorian's face crumpled. You don't mean that. I do. Elira met his eyes without flinching. Now get out of my court. The dismissal was absolute. Final. Dorian stared at her like she was a stranger. Maybe she was. Maybe the desperate, humiliated princess from yesterday had died and something harder had taken her place. You'll regret this, he said, but his voice had lost its conviction. Both of you. Probably, Kael said. But not because of you. Guards, escort the prince and Lady Margot to the summer estate. Make sure they arrive safely, and make sure they stay there. Guards moved forward. Dorian let himself be led away, his shoulders slumped. Margot followed, shooting one last venomous look at Elira before the doors closed behind them. The throne room erupted in whispers. Kael returned to his throne, pulling Elira with him. Well, he murmured, that was dramatic. You enjoyed that. I really did. Something that might have been a smile flickered across his face. You did well. The dismissal was perfect. I wasn't performing. I meant it. I know. Kael's hand found hers again, his thumb brushing across her new ring. That's why it worked. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings and formal appearances. Dinner was a state affair with 40 nobles, all watching Elira for signs of weakness or scandal. She smiled until her face hurt, made polite conversation until her voice went hoarse, played the role of devoted queen until she almost believed it herself. By the time they returned to their chambers, exhaustion had settled into her bones. Kael poured 2 glasses of wine and handed her one. You survived your first full day. Barely. Elira collapsed onto the settee, not caring that her formal gown was crushing beneath her. Does it get easier? No, you just get better at pretending it's easy. He sat across from her, studying her with those dark, unreadable eyes. Dorian will try again. You know that, right? This isn't over. I know. And the court still doesn't trust you. Today helped, but one dramatic dismissal doesn't erase the scandal. Kael swirled his wine. We need to give them something else to focus on, a distraction. Like what? A public gesture, something that demonstrates our marriage is real and beneficial to both kingdoms. He paused. I'm thinking a progress tour. Visit the border territories, show unity, make appearances together. Let people see that we're actually functional. A tour sounds exhausting. It'll be strategic. Kael leaned forward. And it'll get us out of the capital, away from court politics for a while. Give people time to adjust to the new reality. Elira considered it. The idea of escaping this palace, even temporarily, was appealing. But traveling with Kael, maintaining the charade day and night for weeks? When? She asked. 3 days. That gives us time to plan the route and prepare. He set down his glass. Elira, I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer. Her stomach tightened. All right. Do you regret it? Marrying me? The question caught her off guard. Kael's expression was carefully neutral, but something in his voice suggested the answer actually mattered. Did she regret it? 24 hours ago, she'd been abandoned at the altar. Now she was a queen with power, position, and a husband who'd publicly defended her and exiled his own brother rather than let anyone question her legitimacy. No, she said slowly. I don't regret it. I'm terrified and exhausted and completely out of my depth, but I don't regret it. Something in Kael's expression shifted. Relief? Satisfaction? It was gone too quickly to identify. Good, he said quietly. Neither do I. He stood, heading toward his makeshift bed in the sitting room. At the door, he paused. One more thing, the tour. We'll need to share quarters. Separate rooms would undermine the whole point. Can you handle that? Elira's heart kicked against her ribs. I thought we agreed. Separate interests, not lovers. We're not lovers, but we need to look like we could be. Kael's voice was matter-of-fact. Shared rooms, shared appearances, careful coordination. It's just strategy, Elira, nothing more. Right, strategy. Get some rest. Tomorrow we start planning. He disappeared into the sitting room, leaving Elira alone with her racing thoughts and half-finished wine. Just strategy, nothing more. So why did her new ring feel like it was burning against her skin? 3 days later, they departed for the border territories with an entourage of 50 people, Guards, servants, advisors, and nobles eager to observe the new queen's first official tour. The journey would take 6 weeks, covering 12 major cities and countless smaller towns. 6 weeks of performing, of pretending, of sharing rooms with a man who looked at her like a chess piece instead of a person. Their first stop was Milford, a prosperous trading city on the Vance-Draven border. The welcome was elaborate: banners, musicians, cheering crowds. Alira waved and smiled until her arm ached. The mayor's feast that night was endless, course after course, while local nobles asked pointed questions about the wedding, the alliance, the future. Kyle deflected most of them smoothly, his hand resting possessively on the back of Alira's chair. When they finally escaped to their guest chambers, Alira kicked off her shoes and collapsed face first onto the bed. "I hate this," she said into the pillows. "Noted." Kale's voice held amusement. "But you're good at it." The mayor's wife was completely charmed. The mayor's wife asked if I was pregnant yet. Standard question for new royal marriages. "You handled it well." Alira rolled over to glare at him. I told her it was none of her business. Like I said, well handled. Kale removed his formal jacket, and Alira tried not to notice the way his shirt pulled across his shoulders. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we visit the textile factories, then dinner with the Merchant Guild." Joy. But as exhausting as the tour was, something strange began to happen. The more time Alira spent with Kyle, the more she noticed things. The way he listened when she talked, actually listened instead of just waiting for his turn to speak. How he positioned himself between her and potential threats without even thinking about it. The dry humor that surfaced when they were alone. In public, he touched her constantly. Hand on her back, arm around her waist, fingers tangled with hers. Strategic touches meant to demonstrate unity and affection. But sometimes, when he thought she wasn't looking, those touches lingered a fraction too long. And sometimes, late at night when they were both too tired to maintain perfect facades, their conversations felt almost real. "Tell me about Margot," Alira said one night in their 4th city. They were sharing wine again, a habit that had developed naturally. "Your first wife. No one talks about her." Kale's expression shuddered. "What do you want to know?" "Anything. She's a ghost in that palace. Her crown, her ladies, her chambers. But no one mentions her name. Because it hurts." Kale stared into his wine. "We were married for 7 years. She died in childbirth 3 years ago. The baby died with her." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. You asked a reasonable question." He drained his glass. "Margot was kind, patient, everything a queen should be. The court loved her. I cared for her. It wasn't a love match, but it was functional, good even. And then she died. And then she died, and I buried myself in border wars because it was easier than facing an empty palace." Kale's voice was flat, emotionless. Dorian was supposed to take over the diplomatic side, handle alliances and marriages while I handled military threats. Obviously, that didn't work out. Obviously. Alira poured them both more wine. "Do I remind people of her? Is that why they look at me like I'm desecrating her memory?" "No, you're nothing like her." Kale met her eyes. Margot was gentle, diplomatic. She never challenged anyone or made waves. "You're not that." Is that a compliment or an insult? "It's an observation." Something flickered in his dark eyes. "And maybe a preference." Before Alira could respond, shouting erupted outside their window. Kyle was on his feet instantly, hand on his sword. Alira followed him to the balcony. Below, in the courtyard, 2 groups of people were facing off. Locals and Vance refugees from the look of their clothes. The argument was escalating rapidly. "Trade disputes," Kyle muttered. "This region's been tense since the border opened. Stay here." "Like hell." Alira was already heading for the door. They reached the courtyard together, guards rushing to flank them. The argument died when people saw the king and queen, but the tension remained thick. "What's going on?" Kyle demanded. A local merchant stepped forward. "Your Majesty, these Vance refugees are undercutting our prices, stealing business." "We're not stealing anything." A woman with a Vance accent pushed forward. "We're trying to survive. The border opening was supposed to help both sides, but these people want us gone." More shouts, more accusations. The crowd was growing, people spilling in from nearby streets. Kale raised his hand for silence. Everyone calmed down. Why should we listen to you? Someone yelled. You married a Vance princess for politics. You don't care about us. The words hit like a physical blow. Elira felt Kyle tense beside her. That's enough, he said coldly. Is it true? A young man pushed to the front. Is your marriage even real, or is it just another political game while we suffer? The courtyard went silent. Every eye was on them, waiting. This wasn't just about trade disputes anymore. This was about trust, legitimacy, everything their marriage was supposed to represent. Elira felt Kyle's hand find hers, squeezing once. Then she stepped forward, alone. You want to know if our marriage is real? Her voice carried across the courtyard. Here's what's real. I was abandoned at my wedding by a man who cared more about his mistress than peace. Your king could have let the alliance collapse, let your kingdoms go back to war. Instead, he offered me a choice, a partnership, and I took it. She paused, meeting eyes in the crowd. So no, this isn't a fairy tale. It's a strategic alliance. But that doesn't make it less real. King KL and I are building something together. Peace, stability, prosperity for both our kingdoms, including you, including everyone here. We're not asking you to love us. We're asking you to give us a chance to prove this works. Silence. Then the Vance refugee woman spoke up. And the trade disputes? What about those? We'll address them, Kale said, stepping up beside Elira. Tomorrow, a full hearing with representatives from both sides. Fair terms, fair opportunities. That's what this alliance means, balance, not favoritism. Slowly, grudgingly, the crowd began to disperse. Tensions remained, but the immediate crisis was diffused. Back in their chambers, Kyle poured them both wine without asking. That was risky, he said. Admitting the marriage is strategic. It was honest. Elira accepted the glass. They already suspected. Lying would have made it worse. Maybe. Kyle studied her over his wine. You're getting better at this. The court queen thing. I have a good teacher. I don't teach. I demonstrate and you adapt. Same thing. They drank in comfortable silence. Outside, the city was settling into night. Tomorrow would bring the trade hearing, more appearances, more performance. But tonight, in this moment, it felt almost peaceful. Elira, Kale said quietly, that speech about building something together, did you mean it? She met his eyes. Every word. His hand reached across the space between them, fingers brushing her cheek. The touch was gentle, tentative, nothing like the strategic public displays. Good, he murmured. Because A knock at the door shattered the moment. Kale pulled back instantly, expression shuddering. Enter. A messenger burst in, breathing hard. Your Majesty, urgent news from the capital. Prince Dorian has escaped the summer estate. Elira's wineglass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. Elira's wineglass shattered on the floor, red liquid spreading across white marble, like blood. When? Kale's voice was ice. The messenger was pale, sweat-streaked despite the cool night air. 2 days ago, Your Majesty. The estate guards found his chambers empty at dawn. They searched for 12 hours before sending word. By then, the trail was cold. 2 days. Kyle's hands clenched into fists. He could be anywhere by now. Across the border, in hiding, planning. He cut himself off, turned to the captain of his guard. Double the watch on our chambers. No one enters without my explicit permission. And send riders to every city between here and the capital. I want Dorian found. Yes, Your Majesty. The captain hesitated. Should we cancel the remainder of the tour? Hale looked at Elira. His expression was carefully neutral, but she could see the calculation behind his eyes. Canceling would look like fear, like Dorian's escape had rattled them. But continuing meant traveling through territory where his brother might be hiding, waiting, planning something worse than just running away. We continue, Elira said before KL could answer. We don't let him control our movements or our message. That's what he wants, to destabilize this marriage by making us look weak. The messenger shifted uncomfortably. Your Majesty, there's more. Lady Margot is also missing. The guards believe they escaped together. Of course they did. Elira felt something cold settle in her stomach. Dorian and Margot, free and desperate. A former prince who'd lost everything and a scorned noblewoman with a talent for manipulation. That combination was dangerous. After the messenger left, Kyle paced the chamber like a caged wolf. This is coordinated. Dorian's not smart enough to plan a clean escape alone. Someone helped him. Margot? Maybe. Or someone at court who wants to see our marriage fail. He stopped pacing, met her eyes. Elira, if he shows up, if he tries something, I can handle Dorian. I'm not worried about you handling him. I'm worried about what he'll do if he gets desperate enough. Cale moved closer, his voice dropping. Desperate men make dangerous choices. And Dorian thinks you belong to him. That I stole you. I was never his. He doesn't see it that way. Cale's hand came up, fingers brushing her jaw in a gesture that felt nothing like strategy. Be careful. Trust no one outside this room. The touch lingered a moment too long before he pulled away, returning to the cold, controlled king. But Elira's skin burned where his fingers had been. They departed Milford at dawn with triple the usual guard. The next city was Ravensport, a coastal trade hub known for political volatility and loose loyalties. Exactly the kind of place Dorian might hide. The welcome there was different from Milford. Smaller crowds, less enthusiasm. The local lord, Baron Kristoff, greeted them with the bare minimum of courtesy required by protocol. Your Majesties, welcome to Ravensport. His bow was shallow, perfunctory. We've prepared chambers and a feast, though I must apologize. Several of our noble families chose not to attend. The suddenness of your marriage has created certain uncertainties. Translation: half the local nobility didn't recognize her legitimacy and weren't bothering to hide it. How unfortunate, Kyle said coldly. I trust you'll share my disappointment with those families. Perhaps a review of their trade licenses would help clarify the situation. Kristoff went pale. That won't be necessary, Your Majesty. I'm sure it was merely a scheduling conflict. I'm sure. Cale's smile didn't reach his eyes. The feast is tonight? Yes, Your Majesty, at sunset. The feast was a disaster from the first course. The great hall was half empty, the absent nobles' seats glaringly obvious. Those who did attend were cold, assessing, watching Elira like she was a curiosity rather than their queen. Conversations died when she approached, resumed in whispers when she passed. Halfway through the fourth course, a drunk lord stood up. A toast! His voice was too loud, slurred. To our beautiful new queen. May her marriage last longer than her engagement. Scattered, cruel laughter rippled through the hall. Elira felt Cale tense beside her, his hand moving toward his sword, but she put her hand on his arm, stopping him. Thank you, Lord? She kept her voice pleasant, curious. Harwick, Your Majesty. The drunk lord swayed slightly. Just making conversation. No offense meant. None taken. Elira stood and the hall quieted. Since we're making toasts, let me offer one. To Lord Harwick, who's brave enough to insult his queen while too drunk to stand straight. May his courage serve him better tomorrow when he's sober and I remember his face. Dead silence. Then Cale laughed. Actually laughed, sharp and genuine. Well said. He raised his glass. To Queen Elira, who suffers fools poorly and drunken lords not at all. A few nervous laughs. Some genuine ones. Lord Harwick sat down heavily, his face red. But the damage was done. The feast continued in tense, awkward silence. Elira barely tasted her food, too aware of hostile eyes tracking her every movement. Back in their chambers, Kyle was furious. That was unacceptable. Harwick should be ignored. Elira kicked off her shoes, her feet aching. Punishing him just makes me look petty. Better to let it go. You're too forgiving. I'm being strategic. Pick every fight, and you'll have nothing but enemies. She poured wine with hands that weren't quite steady. Besides, he said what half that room was thinking. At least he was honest about it. Kyle took the wine from her, set it down untouched. Elira, you don't have to pretend this doesn't bother you. Not with me. What's the alternative? Break down? Cry about it? She laughed, but it came out bitter. I'm a queen. I don't get to have feelings about cruel jokes and empty seats. That's not true, isn't it? She met his eyes. You said it yourself. They're looking for weakness. Well, being hurt is weakness, so I'm not hurt. I'm fine. You're lying. I'm surviving. Elira's voice cracked slightly. There's a difference. For a long moment, Kyle just looked at her. Then he pulled her into his arms. It wasn't strategic. wasn't for show. Just him holding her while her carefully maintained composure finally cracked, tears she'd been holding back for days finally breaking free. "I hate this," she whispered into his chest. "I hate that they make me feel like I don't belong, like I'm not good enough." "You're good enough." His voice was rough. "You're better than all of them combined. You don't know that. I do." His arms tightened around her. "You think Margot could have handled that toast? She would have fled the room in tears. You stayed. You fought back. You're stronger than you think." Alira pulled back enough to see his face. "Is this real? Or are you just saying what I need to hear?" "It's real." His hand came up, cupping her face. "Everything about this is becoming too real." Before she could ask what he meant, his mouth was on hers. Not like their wedding kiss, performative and controlled. This was desperate, honest, like he'd been holding back for weeks and couldn't anymore. Alira kissed him back with equal desperation, fingers tangling in his hair, all strategy and careful distance burning away in the heat between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kyle rested his forehead against hers. "This complicates things," he said. "Everything's already complicated." "Fair point." He smiled and it transformed his face, made him look younger, less burdened. "We should probably talk about this, set new boundaries, discuss expectations. Or we could not." Alira pulled him back down. "Not tonight. Tonight we can just—" A knock at the door shattered the moment for the second time in as many nights. Kyle swore viciously. This better be important. But his captain's voice through the door was urgent. "Your Majesty, there's been an incident. You need to come. Now." The incident turned out to be a fire in the merchant quarter. Not a large fire, it had been contained quickly, but arson, deliberate. And on one wall, painted in crude black letters, "Vance Whore, go home." Alira stared at the words while guards swarmed around her and Kyle gave sharp orders. Someone had done this. Someone in this city hated her enough to burn buildings and risk lives just to send a message. "We're leaving," Kyle said flatly. "Tonight. This city isn't safe. Running makes it look like they won. Staying makes you a target." He gripped her shoulders, his eyes intense. "Alira, this isn't about pride or politics anymore. Someone just escalated from insults to violence. Next time it might not be a building." He was right. She knew he was right. But leaving felt like surrender. "We have 5 more cities on this tour," she said quietly. "If we leave now, we send a message that I can be intimidated, scared off. That message will follow us everywhere. Better than a message written on your grave." "Is it?" "Because I'm not sure anymore." Alira looked at the burning words again. "I didn't ask to be queen. I didn't want this marriage or this life. But I have it now, and I refuse to let angry cowards decide whether I'm worthy of it. This isn't about worth, it's exactly about worth." She turned to face him fully. "You said I was stronger than I thought. Prove you meant it. Let me stay. Let me finish this tour and show them I'm not going anywhere." Kyle stared at her for a long, tense moment. Then he nodded slowly. "Double guard on you at all times. No public appearances without me present. And if anything else happens, anything, we leave immediately. Agreed?" "Agreed." They didn't leave that night. But Alira didn't sleep either, too aware of the hostile city outside their windows, and the words painted in hatred 3 streets away. The next 2 cities passed in tense, watchful silence. No more fires, but no warmth either. Alira performed her role mechanically. Smile, wave, make speeches about unity and alliance. Inside, she felt herself hardening, each cold reception adding another layer of armor. Kyle stayed close, protective, his touches becoming less about strategy and more about reassurance. At night, in their private chambers, they fell into a careful dance, too aware of what had almost happened in Ravensport, but neither willing to address it directly. Until the night, everything fell apart. They were in Greystone, a mining city in the mountains, attending a formal reception with local nobility. The event was going smoothly, better than Ravensport, at least. Nobles were polite, if not warm. Conversations flowed. Wine poured freely. Too freely, Alira realized an hour in. The servants kept refilling glasses before they were empty, and several nobles were already drunk, including Kyle, except Kyle never got drunk. She'd seen him match professional soldiers drink for drink without showing any effect. "Are you all right?" she asked quietly, during a lull in conversation. Fine, but his words were slightly slurred. Just tired. Long day. His eyes looked wrong, unfocused. His skin was flushed, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool mountain air. Fear shot through her. We're leaving. Now. Don't be dramatic. He swayed slightly, caught himself on the table. Around them, conversation stopped. Nobles turned to stare. Your Majesty? Baron Greystone approached, concern on his face that looked genuine. Are you unwell? He's fine, Elira said quickly, too quickly. Just tired. We'll retire early. Kyle collapsed. One moment he was standing, the next he was on the floor, convulsing. His body jerked violently, eyes rolling back. Foam appeared at the corners of his mouth. Get a physician. Elira dropped to her knees beside him, trying to hold him still. Now! Someone get help! Guards swarmed in. Nobles backed away, horrified or fascinated or both. A physician appeared. When had he been summoned? And bent over Kyle with practiced efficiency. Poison, he said grimly. Something in his wine. We need to induce vomiting, get it out of his system before... Before what? Elira's voice was shrill. Before it stops his heart, Your Majesty. The next 20 minutes were chaos. The physician worked frantically while Elira held Kyle's hand and watched him suffer. Around them, guards sealed the hall, trapping all the nobles inside. Someone was screaming. Someone else was crying. The air smelled like vomit and fear. Finally, Kale stopped convulsing. His breathing steadied. The physician sat back, wiping sweat from his face. He'll live. The poison wasn't strong enough to kill, just incapacitate. He looked at Elira with something like pity. Someone wanted to humiliate him, not murder him. A public collapse at a formal event. It would have destroyed his reputation as a strong king. Political poison, not assassination, but character destruction. Elira stood slowly. Around her, the hall had gone silent. Nobles watched with wide eyes, waiting to see what she'd do. She turned to Baron Greystone. Seal the city. No one leaves until we find out who did this. Your Majesty, surely that's extreme. Someone just poisoned my husband in your hall with your wine at your event. Her voice was cold, flat. Extreme is the minimum response. Seal the city, interrogate the servants, find the wine steward. Now. Greystone scrambled to obey. Kyle was carried to their chambers by guards who looked ready to murder anyone who got too close. The physician stayed, monitoring his condition while Elira paced like a caged animal. 2 hours later, the wine steward was found. Dead. Throat cut, body dumped in the cellar. Beside him, an empty vial that reeked of the same poison the physician had identified. A professional job, the captain of the guard reported. He was likely paid to poison the king's wine, then killed to ensure his silence. We're questioning everyone who had access to the kitchens, but the person who ordered this is probably long gone, Elira finished, or still here, hiding among the nobles. Yes, Your Majesty. She looked at Kyle, unconscious in the bed, his face too pale. Someone had tried to destroy him, humiliate him publicly, turn the strong warrior king into a weak figure collapsed on the floor while his enemies watched, and she was going to find out who. Bring me Baron Greystone, she said quietly, and every noble who was in that hall tonight. I want to question them myself. The captain hesitated. Your Majesty, the king usually handles interrogations. The king is unconscious. I'm handling it. She met his eyes. Is that a problem? No, Your Majesty. The interrogations took all night. Elira questioned 47 nobles, one by one, watching their faces and listening to their voices for any sign of guilt or knowledge. Most were terrified, babbling defenses. A few were indignant, insulted by the implication. None seemed guilty. As dawn broke, exhausted and frustrated, Elira returned to their chambers. Kyle was awake, sitting up in bed and looking furious. You should be resting, she said. You should have woken me. His voice was hoarse. I heard you conducted interrogations all night. Alone. You were poisoned. You needed rest. I needed to be there. Kyle swung his legs out of bed, swayed slightly, cursed. Someone tried to destroy me and you handled it without... I should have been there. You were unconscious. Elira's control finally snapped. You were dying on the floor and I thought I thought I was going to lose you, and she stopped, the admission catching in her throat. Kael went very still. Elira, this was supposed to be strategy, she said, her voice breaking. A political arrangement, united front, separate interests, remember? But watching you collapse, seeing you suffer. She pressed her hands to her face. When did this become real? For me? Kael's voice was rough. Probably the moment you stood in front of 200 nobles and chose to marry me instead of running away. But I told myself it was just attraction, convenience, nothing that would complicate things. And now? He stood, crossing to her despite his obvious weakness. His hands found her face, tilting it up to meet his eyes. Now I think we're both liars, he said quietly. This stopped being strategy weeks ago. Maybe from the beginning. That's not... We can't... Elira's protest died as he kissed her. Not desperate like in Ravensport. Not performative like at their wedding. This was slow, deliberate, honest. A kiss that acknowledged everything they'd been dancing around for weeks. When they broke apart, Kael rested his forehead against hers. Someone just tried to destroy me, Elira. And my first thought when I woke up wasn't about finding them or getting revenge. It was about you, about making sure you were safe. That's not strategic. No, she agreed softly. It's not. So what do we do about it? Before she could answer, shouting erupted outside their window. Both of them moved to the balcony. In the courtyard below, guards surrounded a hooded figure. As they watched, the hood was pulled back, revealing, Dorian, Kael breathed. His brother stood in the center of the guards, hands bound, face bruised and defiant. And beside him, also restrained, was Lady Margot. They'd been caught trying to enter the city through the servants' gate. Well, Kael said softly, dangerously, isn't this interesting timing? The interrogation room was stone and cold, lit by harsh torchlight that threw shadows across Dorian's battered face. He sat chained to a chair while Kael paced like a predator, and Elira watched from the corner. Talk, Kael said flatly. Why are you here? Why now? I heard you were poisoned. Dorian's voice was hoarse. I came to help. Liar. Kael's hand slammed down on the table between them. You've been missing for weeks. You show up the same night someone tries to poison me. That's not coincidence. I didn't do it. I would never. You're my brother. I'm the king who exiled you, who married the woman you claimed to love, who took everything you thought was yours. Kael leaned in close. Give me one reason I shouldn't assume you're behind this. Because I'm not. Dorian's composure finally cracked. I ran because I was scared and stupid, and I've regretted it every day since. When I heard about the poison, I thought if I helped find who did it, maybe you'd forgive me. Let me come home. By sneaking into the city like a criminal? Because I knew you'd never let me in the normal way. Tears streaked down Dorian's face. I made a mistake, Kael. A terrible, stupid mistake, but I'm not a murderer. I'm not a traitor. I'm just an idiot who lost everything. Kael stared at his brother for a long moment. Then he turned to Margot, who'd been silent through the entire interrogation. And you? He asked. What's your excuse? Margot met his eyes with surprising steadiness. None. I helped Dorian escape. I encouraged his worst impulses. I thought it would be entertaining to watch everything fall apart. She paused. I was wrong. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't undo the damage. I know. Margot's voice was quiet. But for what it's worth, we didn't poison you. We arrived 2 hours ago. The guards can verify the timing. We weren't even in the city when it happened. Kael looked at Elira. She shrugged slightly. The timing did check out. The guards had confirmed Dorian and Margot were captured at the gates well after the poisoning, which meant someone else had done it, someone who was still out there. Lock them up, Kael said finally. Separate cells, no visitors. We'll decide what to do with them later. As guards dragged them away, Dorian called out, Kael, brother, please! The door slammed shut on his pleas. Elira moved to Kael's side. Do you believe him? I don't know. He looked exhausted, the poison still affecting him. Part of me wants him to be guilty. Would make everything simpler. But Dorian's a coward, not a strategist. This poisoning was too calculated, too precise. It's not his style. Then who? Someone smart, patient, Someone who benefits from chaos between us. Kael's jaw tightened. Someone we haven't suspected yet. They returned to their chambers as the sun rose, both too wired to sleep despite their exhaustion. Kael stood at the window, staring out at the waking city. "We should return to the capital," he said quietly. "End the tour. This has become too dangerous. If we run now, if we stay, you could be next." He turned to face her. "Elira, whoever did this targeted me to get to you, to destabilize our marriage, make you look weak or complicit. Next time they might go directly for you. I can't—" His voice caught. "I can't risk that. So we give up? Let them win. We regroup, consolidate power, come back stronger." Kael crossed to her, taking her hands. "This isn't giving up, it's survival." Elira wanted to argue, wanted to insist they stay, prove they couldn't be intimidated, but looking at Kael's face, still too pale, eyes shadowed with exhaustion and something deeper, she couldn't. "All right," she said quietly. "We go home." They prepared to leave within the hour, but as servants packed and guards assembled, a messenger arrived from the capital. The look on his face made Elira's stomach drop. "Your Majesties," he said breathless, "there's been news about Queen Elira's family. Duke Corvin has been arrested for conspiracy against the crown." The world tilted. "What?" Elira's voice didn't sound like her own. "That's impossible. My father would never—" "The evidence is substantial, Your Majesty. Letters arranging the poisoning, payment records to the wine steward, correspondence with Dorian about destabilizing your marriage." The messenger swallowed hard. "King Aldrich ordered his arrest 3 days ago. The trial begins tomorrow." Elira looked at Kael, saw shock mirrored in his eyes. Her own father had tried to poison her husband, destroy her marriage, tear apart everything she'd built. "We leave now," Kael said. "Ready the fastest horses. We ride for the capital immediately." But even as they mounted and rode, Elira couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The timing too convenient, the evidence too perfect. Her father was many things, proud, stubborn, traditional, but he wasn't a poisoner, wasn't a conspirator. Someone had framed him, and she was going to prove it, even if it destroyed her in the process. They rode through 2 nights and a day, changing horses 3 times, pushing themselves and their guards to the edge of collapse. Elira's thighs screamed from hours in the saddle, her hands blistered from reins, but she kept pace with Kael without complaint. There was no time for weakness, no time for anything except reaching the capital before her father was condemned for a crime she was certain he didn't commit. The city gates appeared at dawn on the 3rd day, and Elira had never been so relieved to see the towering stone walls. They clattered through streets still mostly empty, heading straight for the palace. No ceremony, no announcements, just desperate speed. King Aldrich met them in the council chamber, looking 20 years older than when they'd left. His hands shook as he gripped his cane. "Thank the heavens you're here," he said hoarsely. "The trial starts in 2 hours. I tried to delay it, but the evidence, Kael, the evidence is damning." "Show me," Kael demanded. They spread the documents across the council table. Letters in her father's handwriting, or what looked like his handwriting, detailing plans to poison Kael and destabilize the marriage. Payment records showing gold transferred to the wine steward who'd been found dead. Correspondence with Dorian about timing and execution. It was thorough, meticulous, too perfect. "This is fake," Elira said flatly. The handwriting experts confirmed. "I don't care what they confirmed. My father didn't write these." She picked up one of the letters, studied it. "The wording is wrong. He never uses contractions in formal writing. And this seal, it's close, but the wax is the wrong shade. Someone copied his style but missed the details." Lord Chancellor Petrus frowned. "Your Majesty, with respect, you're emotionally compromised. I'm his daughter. I know his writing better than any expert." Elira set down the letter with controlled force. "This is a frame. Someone went to elaborate lengths to make it look like my father committed treason." "But who?" Aldrich asked. "Who benefits from this?" "Someone who wants to destroy the alliance between our houses," Kael said slowly. "Someone who gains from turning Vance against Draven. Someone with resources and intelligence enough to forge documents and arrange murders." "That could be anyone," Petrus said. "No." Elira's mind was racing, pieces clicking together. "It has to be someone with access to my father's seal, his handwriting samples, His schedule. Someone who could move freely between both kingdoms without suspicion. Someone we trust. The room went silent. One of us, Kael said quietly. Someone at court. They had 2 hours to find proof. 2 hours before her father would be dragged before assembled nobility and condemned as a traitor. Alira felt panic trying to claw its way up her throat, but she shoved it down ruthlessly. Panic was useless. Action was everything. The wine steward, she said. He was killed to ensure silence, but murders leave traces. Who found the body? Who investigated? Who had access to the cellar where he was dumped? Petrus consulted his notes. Baron Christoph's guards found him. They were searching the building after the poisoning. Alira's blood went cold. Christoph, from Ravensport. He was at the feast in Greystone too, Kael said, his voice hardening. I remember seeing him. Thought it was odd he'd traveled that far for a minor event. He was in both places, both cities where things went wrong. Alira grabbed the forged letters. And Ravensport is a trade hub. Easy access to forgers, assassins, resources. If anyone could arrange this kind of conspiracy, we need proof, Aldrich interrupted. Accusations against a baron require evidence. Substantial evidence. Then we get it. Kael was already moving toward the door. Christoph is in the capital for the trial. His residence is in the South Quarter. We search it. Now. Without a warrant, anything we find is inadmissible. I don't care about admissible. Kael's voice was ice. I care about truth. Coming? Alira followed without hesitation. They took 6 guards and rode hard for Christoph's city residence, a 3-story manor in the wealthy district. The Baron wasn't home, likely at the palace preparing for the trial. His servants tried to bar entry, but Kael's presence and drawn sword ended that resistance quickly. Search everything, he ordered. Documents, letters, anything that looks remotely suspicious. We have 90 minutes. They tore through the house like a storm. Alira headed for the study while Kael took the bedchambers. She rifled through desk drawers, overturned boxes, scanned every paper she could find. Most were mundane: trade agreements, household accounts, dinner invitations. Then she found the locked drawer. It was subtle, built into the desk's base, nearly invisible. But Alira had furniture like this growing up. She knew where to look. The lock was good quality, too good for a simple desk drawer. I need something to break this open, she called. A guard appeared with a dagger. Alira jammed it into the lock, twisted hard. The mechanism broke with a satisfying crack. Inside were more letters. But these weren't forgeries. These were originals. Correspondence between Christoph and someone using the initial M. Plans laid out in careful detail. Poisoned Kael publicly to humiliate him and turn opinion against Alira. Framed Duke Corvin to fracture the alliance. Used Dorian as a distraction and scapegoat. Everything documented, time-stamped, meticulous. Kael! Alira's voice echoed through the house. I found it! He appeared in seconds, read over her shoulder. His face went deadly calm, the expression that meant he was absolutely furious. He said quietly. Who's M? Alira flipped through more letters, found one signed at the bottom. Her heart stopped. Margot, she breathed. That's impossible. Margot has been dead for 3 years. No. Alira's hands were shaking. Not Margot. Margot. Lady Margot Thorne. The pieces crashed together. Margot had been at the wedding, orchestrating Dorian's escape. She'd been with Dorian when he was captured. She had motive, revenge against Kael for choosing duty over her friendship with Dorian. She had opportunity, access to court, connections, resources. She used Christoph, Kael said, reading faster. Promised him trade advantages and political power if he helped destabilize our marriage. The poisoning, the framing, all of it. She orchestrated everything. But she's locked up. We arrested her 3 days ago. These letters are weeks old. She set everything in motion before we caught her. Alira gathered the documents with shaking hands. She knew she'd be caught eventually. This was her final move. Frame my father, destroy the alliance, leave us tearing each other apart even from a prison cell. Kael swore viciously. We have 40 minutes before the trial. Can we get this to the court in time? We have to. They rode back to this palace like death was chasing them. Alira clutched the letters against her chest, terrified they'd somehow disappear before they could present them. Around her, the city was waking fully, early morning crowds filling the streets, making their progress agonizingly slow. The trial hall was already packed when they burst in, both of them disheveled and wild-eyed from the ride. Duke Corvin sat in the defendant's chair, looking smaller than Alara had ever seen him. Her mother sat in the gallery, pale and hollow-eyed. The presiding judge, Lord Chancellor Petrus, looked up in shock. "Your Majesties, the proceedings have begun." "Stop them." Kael's voice cut through the murmur of the crowd. "We have new evidence. Evidence submitted after proceedings begin is essential to justice." Alara strode forward, slammed the letters onto the judge's bench. "Read these now." Petrus hesitated, then picked up the first letter. His eyes widened. He grabbed another, then another. The color drained from his face. This is proof that Duke Corvin was framed," Kael said clearly for the entire hall to hear. "Proof that Baron Kristoff and Lady Margot Thorne conspired to poison me, destabilize the alliance, and destroy my marriage by making it appear the Duke was responsible. Every piece of evidence against him was fabricated. He's innocent." The hall erupted. Nobles surged to their feet, shouting questions. Guards moved to contain the chaos. Through it all, Alara kept her eyes on her father. He was staring at her with an expression she'd never seen before. Something like wonder, mixed with pride. "Order!" Petrus slammed his gavel repeatedly. "Order in this court! I need time to review this evidence." "Then review it," Kael said. "But suspend the trial until you do. And someone arrest Baron Kristoff before he runs." Guards rushed out. The hall slowly quieted. Petrus bent over the letters, reading with increasing agitation. Finally, he looked up. "These appear authentic," he said slowly. "If verified, they completely exonerate Duke Corvin and implicate Baron Kristoff and Lady Margot Thorne in conspiracy, attempted murder, and treason. The trial is hereby suspended pending full investigation. Duke Corvin, you're released to house arrest until—" "No." Kael's voice was flat. "The evidence is clear. Release him completely, with apologies from the Crown for the wrongful arrest." Petrus looked like he wanted to argue, but one glance at Kael's face changed his mind. "Very well. Duke Corvin, you're released. All charges dismissed." Her father stood slowly, like he didn't quite believe it was real. Guards removed his chains. Her mother rushed forward, and they embraced with a desperation that made Alara's throat tight. Then her father's eyes found hers. They stared at each other across the crowded hall. Everything Alara had wanted to say for weeks, the anger, the hurt, the desperate need for his approval, died in her throat. Instead, she just stood there, exhausted and filthy, and holding the letters that had saved his life. Corvin crossed to her. Up close, she could see how thin he'd become, the new lines around his eyes. "You saved me," he said hoarsely. "I proved your innocence. There's a difference." "No. You could have let them convict me. After how I treated you, how I questioned your marriage, how I—" His voice broke. "You had every reason to abandon me, but you didn't. You're my father." Alara's voice was steady despite the tears burning behind her eyes. "I don't have to like you to love you." Something in his face crumpled. "I'm sorry. For everything. For negotiating your marriage without asking, for questioning your choices, for not seeing how strong you've become. I was wrong. About everything." Alara didn't trust herself to speak. She just nodded. Her father pulled her into a hug that smelled like prison cells and fear, and Alara let herself be held like she was 10 years old again before politics and duty had complicated everything. When they separated, Kael was waiting. He nodded to Corvin with something approaching respect. "Duke, welcome back." "Your Majesty." Her father's voice was formal but genuine. "Thank you. For my daughter's courage and your faith in truth. I'm in your debt." "You're family now. Family doesn't keep debts." Kael's hand found Alira's. "But we're not done. Kristoff and Margot need to answer for this." Baron Kristoff was arrested within the hour, trying to flee through the eastern gate with a chest of gold and forged papers. He confessed within minutes of interrogation, the whole conspiracy spilling out in desperate detail. Margot had approached him months ago with promises of power and wealth if he helped destroy the Vance-Draven alliance. She'd provided resources, connections, plans. All he had to do was execute them. The poisoning had been his idea, A way to humiliate Kael without killing him, turning the strong king into a weak figure while pointing suspicion at Elira's family. The framed letters had been Margot's touch, carefully crafted to destroy any remaining trust between the houses. She wanted you to kill each other, Kristoff said bitterly. Tear yourselves apart from the inside. Said it would be beautiful to watch. Where is she? Kael demanded. The real Margot. Not the woman we arrested with Dorian. Kristoff went pale. What? The woman we captured with Prince Dorian 3 days ago claimed to be Margot Thorne, but if she was in prison, she couldn't have been coordinating with you, so where's the real one? I don't know what you... She was supposed to be with Dorian, keeping him distracted. Understanding hit Elira like cold water. That wasn't Margot we arrested. It was a decoy. Someone working for her, playing a role. Which means the real Margot is still free, Kael finished grimly. Still planning, still dangerous. They interrogated the woman who'd claimed to be Margot, but she knew almost nothing. She'd been hired to play a part, seduce Dorian, get arrested with him, maintain the deception. She had no idea where the real Margot was or what her endgame might be. She's probably left the kingdom by now, Petrus said. With Kristoff arrested and her conspiracy exposed, she'd be a fool to stay. But Elira didn't think Margot was a fool. Vindictive, cruel, brilliant, yes, but not foolish. She's still here, she said quietly. Somewhere in the capital. This isn't over for her. She spent months planning this. She won't just walk away. Then we find her, Kael said. Tear this city apart if we have to. The search lasted 3 days. Guards questioned servants, searched abandoned buildings, investigated every lead. The court was in chaos, nobles whispering about conspiracy and betrayal, looking at each other with new suspicion. Through it all, Elira and Kael maintained their united front. Public appearances together, joint decisions, clear demonstrations that the conspiracy had failed to drive them apart. But privately, in their chambers at night, exhaustion was taking its toll. We can't keep this pace, Elira said on the third night, collapsing onto the settee. We're running ourselves into the ground. Then Margot wins. Kael paced restlessly. Every day she's free is another day she can plan, recruit allies, try again. Or she's already gone. Maybe Petrus was right. You don't believe that? No, Elira admitted. But I'm tired, Kael. Tired of fighting invisible enemies and performing strength I don't feel. I just want... She stopped, unsure how to finish that sentence. What did she want? Peace? Safety? Something approximating a normal marriage instead of this constant battlefield? Kael stopped pacing, looked at her. What do you want, Elira? I don't know anymore. She laughed, but it sounded broken. A month ago I wanted to survive my wedding. Now I want this to be over. I want to stop looking over my shoulder. I want one conversation that isn't about strategy or survival. She cut herself off, but Kael crossed to her, kneeling so they were eye level. Say it, he said quietly. I want you. The admission tore out of her. Not the king, not the strategic ally. You, the man who held me while I cried and kissed me like he meant it and looked at me like I matter. That's what I want, and I know it's stupid and complicated, and... He kissed her. Desperate and honest, hands cupping her face like she was precious. When they broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. It's not stupid, he said hoarsely. I want that too. Want you to. Have wanted you since you chose me at that altar instead of walking away. This was never just strategy for me, Elira. It was always more. Then why didn't you say anything? Because I was terrified. Kael's laugh was shaky. I buried one wife, lost her and the child she carried. I told myself I wouldn't care like that again, wouldn't let anyone matter that much. And then you walked into my life being brave and brilliant, and I was lost before I even realized it. Elira kissed him this time, pouring everything she couldn't say into it. All the fear and longing and desperate hope that maybe, somehow, this disaster of a marriage could become something real. When they finally made it to the bedroom, they were both shaking. Not from strategy or duty, but from want. From choosing each other completely for the first time. Morning came too soon. Elira woke wrapped in Kael's arms, his heartbeat steady against her back. For a moment, she let herself believe everything would be fine, that Margot was gone, the conspiracy crushed, the worst behind them. Then a servant knocked frantically, shattering the peace. "Your Majesties, you need to come. There's been a development." They dressed quickly, following the servant to the throne room. A crowd had gathered, nobles whispering urgently. At the center stood a woman Alira had never seen before, middle-aged, plain, wearing servant's clothes. "Who is this?" Kyle demanded. "She claims to be Lady Margot's former maid, Your Majesty," the captain of the guard said. "She came forward voluntarily, says she has information about Lady Margot's whereabouts." The woman curtsied awkwardly. "Your Majesties, my name is Helen. I served Lady Margot for 10 years. When I realized what she was planning, I couldn't be part of it anymore. I know where she is." "Tell us," Alira said. "She's in the palace." Helen's voice shook. "She's been here the whole time, hiding in the old Queen's apartments, the rooms that haven't been used since Queen Margot died. She's been living there, watching everything, planning her next move." The room went silent. The old Queen's apartments, Margot's rooms, the chambers that had been sealed after her death, too painful for anyone to disturb. The one place in the palace no one went. "Show us," Kael said, his voice deadly calm. They assembled guards and followed Helen through the palace. The old Queen's apartments were in the east wing, up a narrow staircase rarely used. The doors were locked, covered in dust. But when they pushed them open, the interior was clean, lived in. Someone had been here recently. They searched room by room, empty sitting room, empty bedroom, empty. The study wasn't empty. Lady Margot Thorne sat at Margot's old desk, surrounded by papers and maps. She looked up as they entered, a smile playing at her lips. "Finally," she said, "I was beginning to think you'd never find me." She didn't try to run, didn't resist when guards seized her arms, just kept smiling that cold, cruel smile. "Why?" Alira demanded. "What did we ever do to you?" "You existed." Margot's voice was pleasant, conversational. "You and your perfect alliance and your noble marriage. Do you have any idea how boring peace is? How stifling? The world needs chaos, drama, interesting things to talk about at parties. You tried to start a war for entertainment? I tried to prove that love is a lie, and alliances are fragile and people are fundamentally selfish." Margot shrugged. "And I almost succeeded. If you'd been a little weaker, if Kael had been a little more traditional, if Dorian had been a little smarter, everything would have fallen apart beautifully." "You're insane," Kael said. "I'm honest." Margot looked at Alira. "You know what your father said when they arrested him? He blamed you. Said if you'd married Dorian like you were supposed to, none of this would have happened. Even when facing execution, he couldn't see past his own prejudices. People are predictably awful. I just encouraged them." "My father was wrong," Alira said quietly. "And so are you. Because we didn't fall apart. We held together. Your conspiracy failed. This time." Margot's smile widened. "But there will be others. There are always others. People like me who find your happiness offensive and your alliance inconvenient. You'll spend your entire lives fighting shadows, never knowing who to trust. Then we'll fight." Kael's voice was ice. "Together, and we'll win. Every time." Margot laughed. "How romantic, how naive. Let's see if you're still so confident in 5 years. 10. When the cracks start to show and the compromises pile up and—" "Take her away," Alira interrupted. "I'm done listening." Guards dragged Margot out, her laughter echoing down the halls until a door slammed shut on it. Alira stood in the center of Margot's old study, surrounded by the ghost of Kael's first wife and the malice of a woman who'd tried to destroy them. Her hands were shaking. Kael pulled her close. "It's over. She's arrested. Kristoff's confessed. The conspiracy is finished." "Is it?" Alira looked up at him. "She's right about one thing. There will be others. People who want us to fail, who benefit from chaos. This won't be the last time." "Probably not." Kael's arms tightened around her. "But we survived this one. We'll survive the next. And the one after that. Together. Promise?" "Promise." The trial of Lady Margot Thorne and Baron Kristoff lasted 2 days. The evidence was overwhelming, their guilt undeniable. Both were convicted of treason, conspiracy, and attempted murder. Kristoff was exiled to the frozen northern territories, stripped of his title and lands, a mercy, considering the alternative was execution. Margot received no mercy. She was sentenced to life imprisonment in the deepest cell of the royal dungeons, with no visitors and no possibility of parole. As guards led her away, she looked at Elira one last time. "You think you won," she said quietly, "but you just proved my point. Love made you vulnerable, made you both vulnerable. That's not strength. It's weakness waiting to be exploited." "Then I'll be weak," Elira said, happily. The court erupted in whispers, but Elira didn't care. She returned to her seat beside Kael, took his hand publicly, and watched Margot disappear into darkness. That night, the palace held a celebration feast. The alliance was secured, the conspiracy crushed. Duke Corvin was free and reconciled with his daughter. Peace seemed, for the moment, real. Elira stood on a balcony overlooking the festivities, watching nobles drink and dance and pretend the past weeks of terror hadn't happened. Kael joined her, handing her a glass of wine. "You should be inside," he said, accepting congratulations, basking in victory. "I'm bassed out." Elira sipped the wine. "Besides, I like it out here, quiet, real." "Fair enough." Kael leaned against the railing beside her. "Your father cornered me earlier, asked if I was treating you well. Threatened to challenge me to a duel if I wasn't." "He didn't." "He absolutely did. I think he likes me now, or at least respects the fact that I haven't run away yet." "That's basically love in Corvin Vance terms." Elira smiled. "What did you tell him?" "That I'm treating you like a queen, because you are one." Kael's hand found hers. "And that I love you, because I do." The words hit her like a physical thing. Elira turned to face him fully, searching his face for any sign of strategy or performance. Found only honesty. "You love me," she repeated. Desperately, inconveniently, completely. Kael's thumb brushed across her knuckles. "I know the timing is terrible and we've barely survived multiple assassination attempts and there's still political chaos to manage. But I'm done pretending this is just an alliance. I love you, Elira, and I want this marriage to be real, if you want that too." Elira set down her wine glass carefully, took both his hands in hers. "I love you too," she said. "And this marriage has been real for weeks. We just stopped pretending about it." Kael pulled her close, kissed her like they weren't standing on a balcony where anyone could see, like they were alone in the world instead of surrounded by court politics and expectations. When they finally broke apart, music drifted up from the feast below. Voices raised in celebration, the sound of a kingdom that had survived chaos and come out stronger. "We should go back," Elira said reluctantly. "Make appearances. Play our roles." "In a minute." Kael held her closer. "Right now I just want to stand here with my wife and pretend the rest of the world doesn't exist." "Your wife," Elira tested the words. "Not your queen or your political ally. Your wife." "My wife," Kael confirmed. "The woman I chose, who chose me back, who saved her father and exposed a conspiracy and proved stronger than anyone, including me, gave her credit for." "Stop. You'll make me cry." "Cry if you want. I love you either way." So Elira did. Let the tears come while Kael held her and music played and the capital celebrated below. Tears for everything they'd survived and everything still to come. For the marriage that had started as survival and become something infinitely more precious. When they finally returned to the feast, hand in hand, the court watched with new eyes. Not judging or assessing, but accepting. Their queen had proven herself. Their king had chosen well. The alliance would hold, and the love that had grown in chaos would endure in peace. The alliance would hold, Elira thought, as she watched nobles dance below. But 3 weeks after Margot's sentencing, a different kind of crisis arrived in the form of her own body. She'd been ignoring the signs. The exhaustion she'd blamed on stress, the nausea she'd attributed to rich court food, the way certain smells made her stomach turn. But when she fainted during a council meeting, hitting the marble floor hard enough to split her lip, denial became impossible. The physician confirmed it within an hour. 6 weeks pregnant, maybe 7. Elira sat in the examination room, hands pressed against her still flat stomach, doing math she'd been avoiding for days. 6 weeks ago, they'd been on the tour. 6 weeks ago, she'd still been a virgin, married in name only. 7 weeks ago, she'd been engaged to Dorian. The wedding night that never happened had been 7 weeks ago. But 8 weeks ago, there had been that final pre-wedding dinner. The one where Dorian had gotten drunk on champagne and cornered her in a dark hallway, insisting they practice for their wedding night. Where he'd been insistent and she'd been too shocked to fight effectively until a servant's footsteps sent him scrambling away. She'd convinced herself nothing had happened, that his fumbling hadn't gone far enough to matter, that she could forget it and move on. Apparently, her body remembered what her mind had tried to bury. The physician was speaking, explaining prenatal care and dietary recommendations, but Alira couldn't hear over the roaring in her ears. This baby, if there was a baby, and the physician seemed certain, belonged to Dorian, the man who'd abandoned her, the man exiled for cowardice, the man who'd tried to reclaim her after she'd married his brother. Not Kyle. The man she actually loved, the man she'd just publicly declared her devotion to, the man who'd saved her and chosen her and believed in her. "Your Majesty?" The physician's voice cut through her panic. "Are you all right? Should I fetch the king?" "No." The word came out too sharp. "No, don't tell him. Not yet. I need time to think." "Of course. But you should tell him soon. This news affects succession, inheritance. I know what it affects." Alira stood on shaky legs. "Give me a few days, please." The physician looked dubious but nodded. "As you wish, Your Majesty." Alira made it back to her chambers before the shaking started. She collapsed onto the settee, hands pressed to her mouth, trying to breathe through the panic. This would destroy everything. The moment people knew she carried Dorian's child, the legitimacy questions would start. Whose heir was it really? Which brother had the claim? Factions would form. The alliance would fracture. Everything they'd fought for would collapse. And Kyle, what would he do when he found out? He'd married her believing she came to him freely, choosing him over his brother. Would he still want her if he knew she carried Dorian's baby? Would he claim it as his own or cast her aside as damaged goods? She spent 3 days in careful avoidance, claiming illness to skip state dinners and council meetings. Kyle tried to check on her, but she sent him away with excuses about female complaints and needing rest. Each lie made her hate herself a little more. On the 4th day, her mother arrived unannounced. Lady Helena swept into Alira's chambers with the kind of purposeful energy that meant she knew something was wrong. She took one look at her daughter's face and dismissed the servants with a sharp gesture. "You're pregnant," she said flatly. Alira's denial died in her throat. "How did you—" "I've been pregnant 4 times. I know the signs." Helena sat beside her daughter. "Does Kyle know?" "No." "Why not?" The whole story spilled out. The pre-wedding dinner, Dorian's assault, the timing that made it impossible for this baby to be Kyle's, the fear of losing everything she'd built. Helena listened in silence, her expression unreadable. When Alira finally ran out of words, her mother took her hand. "You were violated," she said quietly. "You understand that, yes? What Dorian did was an assault. You didn't consent, you tried to stop him. I didn't fight hard enough." "Stop." Helena's voice was sharp. "Don't you dare blame yourself. Dorian is responsible for his actions, not you, never you. But the baby is innocent, and yours. Whatever you decide to do, whatever happens next, that child is a victim in this too." Helena's grip tightened. "But Alira, you have to tell Kyle, immediately, before someone else does." "He'll hate me. He'll hate Dorian." "There's a difference." Her mother's voice softened. "That man loves you. I've seen the way he looks at you, like you hung the stars. He won't abandon you over this." "You don't know that. I know he rode 3 days straight to save your father. I know he publicly defended you when half the court wanted you gone. I know he chose you over peace and protocol and safety." Helena cupped Alira's face. "Tell him. Trust him. You married a good man. Let him prove it." That night, Alira waited until Kyle returned from evening council. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes from managing trade disputes and border patrols. When he saw her actually waiting instead of hiding, relief flooded his face. "You're feeling better," he said. "No, but we need to talk." Something in her tone made him go still. "What's wrong?" Alira had rehearsed this a dozen different ways. Gentle approaches, strategic explanations, careful political framing. But looking at Kyle's concerned face, All her planning evaporated. "I'm pregnant," she said, "and it's not yours." The silence that followed was devastating. Kale stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language, processing the words slowly. "Not mine," he repeated finally. "Then whose?" "Dorian's." The name tasted like poison. "There was a pre-wedding dinner. He was drunk. He cornered me in a hallway, and I tried to stop him, but he was stronger, and I couldn't. He raped you." Kale's voice was absolutely flat. "I don't know if it counts as rape. We didn't fully. Did you consent?" Kale's hands were clenched into fists so tight his knuckles had gone white. "Did you say yes?" "No, but then he raped you." Each word was carefully controlled, but Elira could see the fury building behind his eyes. "He assaulted you, and now you're pregnant with his child." Elira nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Kyle turned away, paced to the window. His shoulders were rigid, his breathing deliberate. Elira watched him process, prepare herself for rejection, for anger directed at her, instead of where it belonged. When he finally turned back, his face was terrible. Not angry at her, angry for her. "Where's Dorian now?" His voice was deadly calm. "The summer estate. Still in exile." "Not anymore." Kale was already moving toward the door. "I'm bringing him back, putting him on trial for assault, making him answer for what he did." "No." Elira caught his arm. "That makes this public, makes everything public. The pregnancy, the assault, the question of succession. It destroys everything we've built." "I don't care. I care." Her voice broke. "Kale, please. I don't want the whole kingdom knowing. Don't want to be the assaulted queen, the damaged woman, the victim everyone pities. I want this to go away." Kael's expression shattered. He pulled her into his arms, holding her while she finally let herself cry. Ugly, wrenching sobs for the violation she'd tried to bury and the future now impossibly complicated. "It's not going away," he said quietly into her hair. "You're pregnant. That baby will be born. People will know. We can't hide this." "I know." Elira pulled back enough to see his face. "So what do we do?" Kale was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Then, "We claim the child as mine." "What?" "Publicly, this baby is ours. Conceived during the tour when we were sharing quarters. Anyone who questions the timing gets shut down immediately." His hands cupped her face. "This child will be legitimate, recognized, heir to the throne. Not a bastard, not questioned, not used as political ammunition." "But it's not yours." "It will be." Kale's voice was firm. "I'll raise it, love it, protect it. That makes it mine in every way that matters." Elira stared at him. "You do that? Claim another man's child?" "I'd do anything for you." He kissed her forehead gently. "And Elira, this baby is as much a victim of Dorian's violence as you are. It deserves a father who wants it, a family that protects it. I can give it that." "What about Dorian? What do we tell him?" Kale's expression went cold. "Nothing. He stays exiled. If he ever tries to claim paternity or rights to this child, I'll have him arrested for assault. The only reason I'm not doing it now is because you asked me not to. But if he threatens you or this baby again, that protection ends. He'll figure it out. Do the math. Let him. He has no proof, no standing, no power." Kale's jaw set. "And if he's smart, he'll keep his mouth shut and accept exile as the mercy it is." Over the next weeks, they carefully managed the announcement. Queen Elira was pregnant, approximately 8 weeks along, the baby conceived during the royal tour. The timing was tight, barely within the window of their marriage, but plausible enough that only the most dedicated gossips questioned it. Most of the court was thrilled. An heir secured succession, strengthened the alliance, proved the marriage was fruitful and functional. The whispers that did circulate were quickly crushed by Kael's icy stares and strategic manipulation. Anyone who suggested the baby might be illegitimate found themselves facing sudden trade audits or tax reviews. The message was clear: question the queen's child and answer to the king. But Elira couldn't shake the guilt. Lying to the entire kingdom felt wrong. Letting Kael claim another man's child felt wrong. Everything about this felt like building a palace on a foundation of lies. "You're thinking too much," Kael said one night, finding her awake and staring at the ceiling. I can hear it from across the room. I'm thinking the right amount. Elira rolled to face him. We're lying to everyone. Doesn't that bother you? We're protecting you and this child. That's not a lie. That's strategy. What's the difference? Intent. Kale pulled her closer. A lie is selfish. Protection is love. I'm doing this because I love you. Because I want this baby to have a chance at a normal life without being used as a political weapon. Is that really so terrible? Put that way, it sounded almost noble. Elira wanted to believe it, wanted to accept this gift Kael was offering, legitimacy, protection, family. But doubt gnawed at her. What happened when the child was born and looked like Dorian? When people started noticing similarities, asking questions? When the truth eventually came out, as truth always did? The answer came from an unexpected source. 2 months into the pregnancy, Dorian sent a letter. It arrived through unofficial channels, bypassed guards and protocols to land directly in Elira's hands. She opened it alone, hands shaking. Elira, I know. About the baby. About what happened that night. I was drunk and stupid and I hurt you. I can't take that back. But I can give you something. My silence. Tell Kael the child is his. Raise it as yours. I won't contest it. Won't claim paternity. Won't cause problems. But I need you to know. I'm sorry. For everything. For abandoning you, for hurting you, for being too much of a coward to face what I'd done. The baby deserves better than me as a father. You deserve better than me as a husband. Kael is better. In every way. Take care of our child. And when it asks about me someday, tell it the truth. That I was weak when it needed me to be strong. I'm sorry, Dorian Elira read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. This was what she'd needed. Confirmation that Dorian wouldn't fight the lie, wouldn't use their child as a weapon. His blessing, horrible as it was, to move forward. She showed the letter to Kael that night. He read it in silence, his expression unreadable. When he finished, he handed it back. Burn it, he said quietly. What? Burn it. That letter is evidence. Proof that this baby isn't mine biologically. We don't need it. We don't want it. Kael's eyes met hers. Dorian gave you his silence. Take it. Let that be the end of his involvement. Elira looked at the letter, at Dorian's messy handwriting and obvious guilt. Then she crossed to the fireplace and fed it to the flames. The paper caught quickly, curling and blackening. Within seconds, Dorian's confession was ash. It's done, Kael said. No more looking back. This baby is ours. Ours to raise, ours to protect, ours to love. Everything else is history. Elira turned to him, this man who'd agreed to claim a child that wasn't his, who'd burned evidence rather than use it for political advantage, who loved her despite every complication she'd brought into his life. Why? She asked. Why do all this for me? Because you're my wife. Because I love you. Because family is what you build, not just what you're born into. Kael pulled her close. And because that baby, our baby, deserves a father who chose to be there, not one who was trapped by biology. The pregnancy progressed. Elira's body changed, swelling with new life. The court watched obsessively, tracking every appearance, every outfit choice, every hint about the baby's health. Through it all, Kael stayed close, his hand on her expanding stomach, his presence at every physician visit, his fierce protection when courtiers got too invasive with their questions and advice. 6 months in, Elira finally felt the baby move, a flutter like butterfly wings against her ribs. She was in a council meeting when it happened, discussing trade routes with Lord Petrus and 3 regional governors. She must have made a sound, because Kael's hand immediately found hers. The baby? He asked quietly. She nodded, unable to speak, placed his hand on her stomach where the movement had been. They waited together, and after a moment it happened again. A stronger kick this time, unmistakable. Kael's face transformed. Wonder replaced the careful control he always maintained. His hand spread wider, covering as much of her stomach as possible, waiting for more movement. That's our baby, he said softly. Our child. And in that moment, watching his genuine joy, Elira finally believed it. Biology didn't matter. Dorian's involvement didn't matter. This baby was theirs because they chose it, because they wanted it, because they'd fight anyone who tried to take it away. The council meeting dissolved into congratulations and well wishes. But later, alone in their chambers, Kael pulled Illyra close. I need to tell you something, he said, before the baby comes, before everything changes. All right, I've known from the beginning. His voice was steady. About Dorian, about what he did. Your mother told me the day after you found out you were pregnant. Illyra pulled back, shocked. You knew? This whole time? She came to me, said you were terrified to tell me, that you thought I'd reject you. Kael's hands framed her face. I wanted to kill him, wanted to drag him back and make him answer for it publicly, but your mother said you needed time, needed to tell me yourself, so I waited. Why didn't you say anything? Because I needed you to trust me, to choose to tell me instead of having the information forced out. His thumb brushed away a tear she hadn't realized was falling. And you did. You trusted me with the truth. That mattered more than the timing. You should have told me you knew, probably, but I was terrified too. Terrified you'd think I only stayed out of duty, that I was just being noble instead of honest. Kael's voice dropped. So let me be honest now. I love you. I love this baby. Not because I have to, but because I want to. Because you're both mine in every way that counts. Illyra kissed him, tasting salt from both their tears. Everything she'd been afraid of, rejection, abandonment, conditional love, dissolved in the certainty of his embrace. I love you too, she said against his mouth. So much it terrifies me. Good. Terror means it matters. 3 months later, on a cold winter night, the baby came early. Labor hit fast and brutal. One moment Illyra was fine, the next she was doubled over in agony, water breaking across the marble floor. Servants scattered to fetch the physician while Kael half carried her to the birthing chambers. The next 18 hours were agony, pain that eclipsed everything else, made her scream and curse and beg for it to be over. Kael stayed beside her the entire time, letting her grip his hand hard enough to bruise, whispering encouragement when she had the strength to listen. Finally, as dawn broke, the physician said the words she'd been waiting for. Push, now. Illyra pushed with everything she had, one final massive effort that felt like it would tear her apart. And then suddenly there was crying. Not her crying, a baby's cry, sharp and indignant and beautifully alive. A girl, the physician announced, placing a squirming, bloody bundle on Illyra's chest. You have a daughter, Your Majesty. Illyra looked down at the tiny face, the downy dark hair, the eyes that would probably change color, but right now were dark like Kael's. Like Dorian's. Like the whole Draven line. Her daughter. Their daughter. She's perfect, Kael said hoarsely, his hand covering both of theirs. You're both perfect. The baby, Princess Lyanna, they named her 3 days later, became the center of the palace's world. Nobles came to pay respects. Gifts arrived from allied kingdoms. The celebration lasted a full week. Through it all, Illyra watched for signs that people suspected, watched for whispers about timing or appearance. But everyone seemed genuinely thrilled. The alliance had produced an heir. The future was secured. Only once did doubt surface. King Aldrich visited when Lyanna was 2 weeks old. He held his granddaughter with trembling hands, tears streaming down his aged face. She has Dorian's eyes, he said quietly. Illyra's heart stopped, but Kael just smiled. She has Draven eyes, father. Same as you. Same as me. Same as every member of our line for generations. Aldrich looked at his son for a long moment. Something passed between them, understanding, acceptance, a silent agreement to let this truth stand. Yes, the old king said finally. Draven eyes. Beautiful. He never mentioned it again. 6 months after Lyanna's birth, Illyra stood in the throne room addressing assembled nobility from both kingdoms. A formal gathering to celebrate the alliance's first anniversary and the princess's christening. She wore her crown without thinking about its weight now, held her daughter without second-guessing every choice, stood beside Kael not as a political necessity, but as a true partner. A year ago, she began, her voice carrying through the silent hall, I stood at an altar and watched my world collapse. Everything I thought I knew about my future disappeared, and I had a choice, run or stand, hide or fight. She looked at Kael, who nodded encouragement. I chose to fight, to build something new from the ruins of what should have been. And I won't lie, it was hard, brutal. There were moments I wanted to give up, moments I thought I wasn't strong enough. Her eyes found her father in the crowd, her mother beside him, both watching with pride. But I learned something. Strength isn't about being perfect. It's about surviving, about making impossible choices and living with them, about loving people even when it's complicated and scary and inconvenient. She shifted Liana to her other arm. The baby gurgled happily, oblivious to the weight of the moment. This alliance, our kingdom, our family, it's built on truth. Not the truth of perfect bloodlines or traditional arrangements. The truth that family is what you make it. That love is a choice, not a transaction. That the best things in life often come from the worst moments. Kale's hand found her free one, squeezed gently. So thank you, Elira continued, for giving us a chance, for trusting that two people who barely knew each other could build something real, for accepting that strength sometimes looks like vulnerability, and courage sometimes looks like asking for help. She raised her daughter slightly. Princess Liana is proof that beauty can come from chaos, that hope survives disaster, that the future is always worth fighting for. The hall erupted in applause. Not polite, obligatory court clapping. Real applause. Acceptance. Celebration. Later, alone in their chambers, Kyle opened a bottle of expensive wine they'd been saving. To survival, he said, raising his glass. To truth, Elira countered. To love. Kael's eyes were warm. The unexpected kind that changes everything. They drank, then sat together watching Liana sleep in her cradle. The baby's tiny chest rose and fell peacefully, completely unaware of the complicated history that had brought her into the world. Do we ever tell her? Elira asked quietly. About Dorian? About how she was really conceived? Maybe. When she's old enough to understand. Or maybe we don't. Kael's arm settled around her shoulders. Honestly, I don't know. We'll figure it out when the time comes. That's not very strategic of you. I'm learning that some things can't be strategized. Sometimes you just have to trust that love is enough. Elira leaned into him, watching her daughter dream. Outside, the capital hummed with life. Traders from both kingdoms mixing freely in markets, nobles from rival houses drinking together in taverns. Peace that had seemed impossible a year ago now felt solid, real, not perfect. They still had trade disputes and border tensions and political rivals looking for cracks in the alliance. But the foundation was strong, built on honesty and choice, and the kind of love that survived poison and conspiracy and assault, built on truth. 5 years later, Elira stood in the same throne room for a very different ceremony, Princess Liana's 5th birthday celebration. The hall was packed with children from noble families, running and playing while their parents tried to maintain dignity. Liana held court like she was born to it, directing games and settling disputes with the natural authority of someone who'd never doubted her place in the world. She had Kael's laugh and Elira's stubbornness, and eyes that were distinctly Draven, but uniquely her own. Sometimes Elira looked at her daughter and saw Dorian in the shape of her smile or the tilt of her head, but mostly she just saw Liana, brilliant, fierce, loving, a person in her own right, not defined by biology or scandal or the complicated circumstances of her conception. She's going to be a handful when she's older, Kael said, watching their daughter organize a dozen children into some elaborate game involving crowns made of flowers. She already is a handful. Fair point. Kael's hand found Elira's, their fingers interlacing automatically. No regrets? About which part? The disaster wedding? The political conspiracy? The assault? The pregnancy scare? The lies we told? Any of it. All of it. Elira thought about the question seriously. About the woman she'd been 5 years ago, uncertain, afraid, desperate to prove herself. About the queen she'd become, confident, strategic, unafraid to make hard choices. No regrets, she said finally, because all of it, every terrible, complicated, messy piece, led to this, to her, to us. To a kingdom that's stronger because we refuse to let it break. To truth, Kael said softly. To love, Elira corrected. The kind that transforms disasters into family. Across the room, Liana caught sight of her parents and waved enthusiastically. Elira waved back, heartful in a way she'd never thought possible. This wasn't the life she'd planned, wasn't the marriage she'd agreed to, wasn't the family she'd imagined. It was better, built on truth and choice and the radical belief that the worst moments could become the best beginnings, that abandoned altars could lead to genuine partnership, that assault didn't define you, that children were shaped by who raised them, not who conceived them. That love, real, complicated, hard-won love, was worth every moment of chaos it took to find. Elira had entered a cathedral as a princess facing humiliation. She'd emerged as a queen who'd learned that strength meant surviving, truth meant choosing, and family meant fighting for what you built together. And standing in that throne room, watching her daughter play and feeling her husband's hand warm in hers, Elira knew with absolute certainty she'd choose it all again. Every impossible, terrifying, beautiful moment. Because truth, in the end, had set them all free.